Because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice and say, Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Jehovah Jireh, my provider. Jehovah Nissi, Lord, you reign in victory. Jehovah Shalom, my Prince of Peace, and I worship you because of who you are. Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Jehovah Jireh, my provider. Jehovah Nissi, Lord, you reign in victory. Jehovah Shalom, my Prince of Peace, and I worship you because of who you are. Lord, I worship you because of who you are. Because of who you are, I give you glory. Because of who you are, I give you praise. Because of who you are, I will lift my voice and say, Lord, I worship you because of who you are. And I worship you because of who you are. Jehovah Jireh, my provider. Jehovah Nissi, Lord, you reign in victory. Jehovah Shalom, my Prince of Peace, and I worship you because of who you are. Lord, I worship you because of who you are.
Good morning, church family, and welcome to another virtual experience here at New Morning Light Baptist Church. I'm always excited to be with you and worship with you on Sunday and just to give you what the Lord has put on my heart to preach and teach this Sunday morning. This Sunday, I'm coming from the book of Proverbs. But before we get into this text, I just want to acknowledge and I just want to thank each and every one of you for being with me on this journey, being with me along this path of ministry. And I just want to say I'm excited as we come up to my 1-year anniversary, pastoring in general and pastoring this church. I'm so excited about that, brothers and sisters. It means so much to me to be able to celebrate 1 year with you all. Next Sunday, I'm going to have one of my pastoral mentors, Minister Cassandra Henderson. She's going to be bringing the word for me on this pastoral anniversary. And as I've told you all in the past, and as you've seen in the past, she's a dynamic woman of God, and she just has meant so much to me in my journey of ministry. She was my youth minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and then she became my supervisor at the Breakthrough Fellowship when I was the youth and BT Kids young adult minister over there. And she has been very instrumental in my faith formation and helping me think through the text and helping guide me through my sermons and through my pastoral ability. And I'm just so grateful that she thought enough of me to hire me back when I was a young minister trying to figure it all out in ministry, and also thought enough of me to be able to have something nice to say next Sunday. So you all tune in next Sunday for my 1-year pastor anniversary and listen to what she has to say. That makes me think about the song, I like these songs by Carlton Pearson because he really musters up the spirit when he says, I get joy when I think about what he's done for me. And I get so much joy when I think about all we've come through as a church, all of the different highs and lows we've had in this very sanctuary. You all know what I'm talking about. There was so many ups and downs, so many waves that we came through when it came through me being here at this very moment. And we have come a long ways. We've done so much. And I thank the God that was with us back then, the God that is with us right now, and the God that will continue to lead us on. So brothers and sisters, I have a passage of scripture this morning which just spoke to my spirit as I come up to my 1-year anniversary and just spoke to my heart. And it comes out of the book of Proverbs. That's Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 6. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Brothers and sisters, I would like to begin this sermon with verse 6 instead of verse 5. I would like to begin there by focusing on the aspect of God making your path straight. You see, I want to entitle this passage, Watch Your Path. Because as you know, along the path and journey called life, there are many obstacles. There are many things that come up. There are many things that try to sway us from our path and distract us. But nonetheless, the text reminds us, and the text tells us that if you trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not rely on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him, he will make your path straight. So brothers and sisters, we can be thankful for how God has guided us along the path. We can be thankful for the times that we have strayed from the path and God has brought us back to the path. Brothers and sisters, this text is a reminder that there's a God with us along this path, that if we trust in, we can reach our destination. Family, it doesn't say he will remove all obstacles from the path. It doesn't say he'll remove hurt, pain, sadness, and loneliness from the path. It says he will make your path straight. You see, this scripture speaks to orientation and not destination. Orientation meaning direction. Orientation meaning understanding where you are. Brothers and sisters, if you've ever been lost on the road or lost your sense of direction and you're trying to figure out whether you need to go left or right or figure out what exit you need to go on, what that is you are disoriented at that point in time. You're trying to figure out which direction you should go. And brothers and sisters, through trusting in God, no matter how disoriented we get, we can be reoriented to the right path by trusting in him. Did you know that you can be on the right path, but on the wrong spiritual path? What does that mean? Well, let me break that down to you. Brothers and sisters, that means when God has you in the right position, when God has you where he wants you, but because it's not where you want to be, you're upset and your spirit is in a place of unrest. Brothers and sisters, sometimes we find ourselves in a predicament where we are upset where God has us and we don't see the longevity of why he has us where he has us, or we don't see or understand why he's doing what he's doing in our lives. And sometimes we throw a fit and we're kicking and screaming along the path. But brothers and sisters, if we're just patient and if we just trust in him, we'll realize that we're not on the wrong path. We're on the right path that is setting us in the right direction, even though we can't see the road. And brothers and sisters, I want to give you an example of my personal life. When I joined the military and when I started pastoring this church, I was so excited. But then as time progressed, I started feeling like maybe I'm on the wrong path. I started having a conflict, as you all know, with the schedule of the military and the schedule of the church. You see, the recruiter told me that me being a chaplain in the military, I'd only have to serve 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out of the year. But as you all know, as a congregation, I've had to go to serve at these different locations a lot more than 1 week in a month and 2 weeks out of the year. We started off after the 3 months of me being here, having to be gone another 3 months for training. And brothers and sisters, all of that frustrated me. It made me very upset with the path that God had me on. I was like, why would you do this, Lord, when I'm trying to be faithful to you in your church? Why did I get the wrong information when the recruiter told me he had told me the right information? Brothers and sisters, if it wasn't for one of my friends, who's also a chaplain, that gave me this insight, he said, Charles, you're a pastor and you're also a chaplain. And some of these soldiers have only had chaplains and not actual pastors. And because they've not actually had pastors with a pastor's heart, some of them have never truly had the religious encounter with God that they need while they're on this battlefield. And how do you know that in the midst of you kicking and screaming along the path, in the midst of all of your frustration and you not understanding what God is doing, what if God is spending you for a specific somebody, for a specific situation that only you can minister to, that only you can bring the word to at a specific time, and while you're complaining, God is trying to use you, and if you just stayed focused and trusted in the Lord and not leaned on your own understanding, you would realize that God is doing a mighty work in you. See, brothers and sisters, sometimes a pastor needs a pastor. Sometimes a chaplain needs a chaplain. Sometimes you need the counsel of wise people to help you understand. Yes, God has you on the right path, but your spirit isn't on the right path. Brothers and sisters, what I've realized is that we can also be in a state where we're on the wrong path, but if our spirit's on the right path with God, God can move us in the right direction. Because God can always use a willing spirit. Brothers and sisters, with me and my situation, I realized if I changed my mindset and gave God a willing spirit instead of a frustrated and contrite spirit, maybe I would have better outcomes. And brothers and sisters, I have to say, we haven't missed a Sunday here at New Morning Light. We haven't skipped a beat here at New Morning Light. And the word has continued to be preached and declared every Sunday, every Bible study, and even on our prayer call. Brothers and sisters, it's so good. And you'll see that the path can be just a little bit smoother. Yes, you'll have obstacles. Yes, you'll have things that you'll have to face along the way. However, through trusting in God and leaning on his understanding and not on your own understanding, do you find yourself being able to deal with the things along the path. So sometimes you have to watch your spirit. Sometimes you have to watch your step along the path, because the enemy will try to disorient you with your emotions. There's a lot of disorder that we're facing right now along our current path of life. We have a lot of disorder in the world that can influence us to be fearful, go down the path of despair, go down the path of anger, go down the path of isolation and depression. There's a lot of things that can distract us along the path. But brothers and sisters, when you find yourself veering too far to the left, or veering too far to the right, veering too far along the lines of despair or anger or fear or depression, what you can do is come back to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6 that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways consider him, and he will make your path straight. That can be your roadmap to getting back on the path. Brothers and sisters, we must consistently reorient ourselves to maintaining a full and faithful relationship with God no matter what comes along the path. We must constantly orient ourselves. That means align ourselves with God in a way that allows us to be focused no matter what comes up. That's why King David said in the book of Psalms, create in me a clean heart and a renewed spirit. Brothers and sisters, that speaks to the fact that on a day-to-day basis, we must renew our mind, renew our spirit to be in alignment with God. That's why the hymn writer says, I need thee, oh, I need thee every hour, I need thee. Because, brothers and sisters, we can't survive off just trusting in God every other week, or just trusting in God on Thursdays and not Fridays, or not every day through the week, or just trusting in God once a month or once a year. We need him every hour, every second, and every moment of each day. Because, brothers and sisters, the text tells us in the book of Psalms that the enemy comes to sift us like wheat. And if you don't have on the full armor of the Lord that it speaks about in Ephesians, if you don't have on that full armor, you will be weighed down and beaten down by the things along the path of the world. So brothers and sisters, when you feel yourself going down the wrong path, you must pray to God to become realigned. We must realign ourselves with God. And you must do a spiritual alignment with God, brothers and sisters. Just like when you're driving in your car and your steering wheel is pulling too far to the left or to the right, what that speaks to is the fact that the elements along the road, the wear and tear of the road on your tire, is causing your car to veer to the left or to the right. And brothers and sisters, what that means is you need to go and get an alignment. And just the same way, your tires can be worn down and your car can be worn down and veers too far this way or that way, your spirit can be worn down as well. And when your spirit is worn down, brothers and sisters, your spirit can become susceptible to the things of the world. Your spirit can become susceptible to the things of anger and loneliness and get caught up in the very things that are not of God. Get caught up in these pathways of sin that only lead to death and destruction. And brothers and sisters, what we must do as Christians and as believers is realign ourselves and check our alignment. Checking our alignment makes sure that no matter what comes up along the path, we don't find ourselves in the ditch that is hard for us to get out of. Brothers and sisters, no matter what comes up along the path, we're so aligned that even when our car starts or even when our spiritual vehicle starts to shift, God helps us get back on track. And I'm not saying that God can't help you get back on track even when you don't acknowledge him, but it's a lot easier and takes a lot less time when you're connected to God. Remember, I told you all about how when I use a GPS, sometimes a destination that only should take 15 minutes might wind up taking me 20 and 30 minutes. All because I began to see things along the path that looks familiar. And I start thinking that I know a little bit more than the GPS, and I'll say, well, I'll veer down this path, or I'll go down this way. And what that does is add more time to my destination because I've started trusting in my own memory and my own ability, although I don't know which way to go. And that causes me to go along the wrong path, causing it to take longer for me to reach my destination. And brothers and sisters, that's just like us spiritually. When we're not aligned with God spiritually, sometimes the goal he has for us, sometimes the destiny he had for us, we could have accomplished 10, 15 years ago. We could have accomplished soon as we got out of school, soon as we left our parents' house. We could have accomplished a couple of months ago, but because we got on the wrong path or went down the wrong track, now we find ourselves in a situation where it's taken us longer to do what God has called us to do. Brothers and sisters, the book of Proverbs is a reminder. Brothers and sisters, the book of Proverbs is something that helps us reorient ourselves to a right relationship with God. If you all don't remember, the book of Proverbs is known as wisdom literature. And this wisdom literature is comprised of 5 books. That's the book of Job, the book of Ecclesiastes, the Song of Solomon, the book of Psalms, and Proverbs. And brothers and sisters, the authors of these different books are broken down between King Solomon and King David. And there are some other writers that have contributed to these books, but King Solomon and King David are the most notable ones that have written what is known as wisdom literature. But what's ironic about this, brothers and sisters, is that both kings had wisdom and the favor of God. But both kings failed God and went down the wrong path. You see, they got comfortable and stopped watching their path. They got comfortable and stopped being in the perfect and right relationship with God that they first had when they first had in the beginning of their story. Brothers and sisters, let me remind you about King David. You know King David. Before he was king, he was just David the shepherd boy. And brothers and sisters, what's ironic about David the shepherd boy is because before he reached the status of king, he was faithful. He was faithful when he didn't have anything, and God knew that if this young man is faithful to me with nothing, I know he'll be faithful to me with something. And brothers and sisters, what made God truly love David is that while he was in the field, while he was caring for the sheep, he constantly prayed and worshiped God. He constantly was in relationship with God. And even when he was elevated from the field of the sheep to the field of the battlefield, where he was fighting against Goliath, and Goliath challenged him and said, "Who is this young boy coming to fight me?" And he felt as though David wasn't worthy. We can remember David said, "The same God that helped me fight the wolf, the lion, and the bear against my sheep is the same God that will help me defeat this uncircumcised Philistine." And brothers and sisters, what's so ironic about this, what's so deep about this, is that David took the faith he had in the field and applied it to the faith he needed on the battlefield. Brothers and sisters, he elevated his faith with his situation. Pastor, what does that mean? That means, brothers and sisters, when God elevates you from one area of your life to another area of your life, the problems are elevated with your status. That means if you get a promotion, the problems you had at the level that you were before you got the promotion are going to get a promotion right with you. So they'll be looking you face to face and neck. However, brothers and sisters, if your faith is still down here, but your demons are up here, you'll move right back down to where you were or where your faith level is, because the very demons and the very evilness and all the things that have tried to take away from you that is up here will then keep pushing you further and further down until you can't even operate at the level God has built you up to. So brothers and sisters, what that teaches us in the text from David is that David constantly elevated his faith, elevated his worship to each level that God blessed him. Brothers and sisters, he moved from the field with the sheep to the field of the battlefield, to the palace with King Saul. And he had so many issues with King Saul. We remember how Minister Hurd talked about how King Saul chased him into a cave and how he is now running for his life. But even in the cave, he still worships God. And brothers and sisters, even when he has the opportunity of killing King Saul, he is in such deep relationship with God. He said, because God first blessed you, King Saul, with this position, I won't touch you because you're still anointed by God. And brothers and sisters, what that speaks to is the fact that when you're in right relationship with God, it doesn't matter what your enemies do. It doesn't matter what your haters say. It doesn't matter who comes against you. God can keep you in perfect peace, even in the midst of chaos and in the face of death. And brothers and sisters, God liked this type of faithfulness David had. God liked this type of trust in him that David had. So God continued to bless him. And brothers and sisters, the text tells us that the Lord made David victorious everywhere he went. And there's this constant refrain in the story of King David where David is where we're constantly shown that the Lord is with David along his journey and along his path, no matter what. But brothers and sisters, David has a son named Solomon. And his son, who is also becomes king, King Solomon, is the son that he has by Bathsheba. And brothers and sisters, the irony of this, the irony in the fact of that King Solomon gets almost elevated to the level of King David is in the fact that King Solomon's life comes about through the treachery and through the downfall of King David's misplaced faith. Brothers and sisters, David was blessed so much and David had so much that I think he developed a spirit of entitlement. And brothers and sisters, this spirit of entitlement began to permeate his mind and permeate his spirit, so that anything he wanted, because of everything that he had faced as far as obstacles in the past, began to be something that he wanted to acquire, to the point of which he no longer sought approval from God. Brothers and sisters, most people know this story in the Bible if they don't know any other story in the Bible, but David was on the rooftop. And he sees this woman bathing named Bathsheba. And when he sees her, because of all the success he's had in the past, because he's king and nothing has been out of his control, and everything he's wanted, he's been able to have, he sees her and he wants her in spite of the fact she's married. And brothers and sisters, he takes Bathsheba for himself and sleeps with her. And when he sleeps with her, brothers and sisters, he brings the beginning of the fall of his empire. Brothers and sisters, him sleeping with Bathsheba is the beginning of him going down the wrong path. It was the beginning of this spirit of entitlement that began to permeate his household, that began to destroy the whole Davidic dynasty. And brothers and sisters, we see how his Davidic reign was destroyed by the very decision that he made to take somebody else's wife. No, not only did he commit adultery, brothers and sisters, but he also had the husband of the woman who he's taken for his own killed on the battlefield. So brothers and sisters, God is upset with David now. He's upset with him because David used to be faithful. David used to be a real one. David used to be loyal. But now David has become so successful that he started trusting in his own desires, his own wants, and stopped trusting in God. You see, in David's life, we see an example of when you veer from trusting in the Lord and trusting in your flesh, trusting in your own ability, you make mistakes and you go down the wrong path. Brothers and sisters, this mistake created this spirit of entitlement that permeated his household. And what happens is the prophet tells us that the sword will never leave David's house, meaning his household will be filled with calamities of civil war. And brothers and sisters, David has several children. But the demise of his household comes in the fact that his children, Amnon, Tamar, and Absalom, begin to fight with one another. Brothers and sisters, David's son Amnon falls in love with his sister Tamar and rapes Tamar. And then Amnon's brother Absalom finds out about Tamar's rape, and in order to avenge her, he kills his brother Amnon. And brothers and sisters, Absalom has now killed his brother, and his sister is now disgraced, and he's so upset that he then plots to overthrow King David. And when he tries to overthrow King David, brothers and sisters, David is so upset with the fact that now the fulfillment of the prophecy of the sword never leaving his house is coming through, that he doesn't immediately fight with his son at all. He doesn't immediately fight with his son Absalom because it's his son and he still loves him. And brothers and sisters, what winds up happening is Absalom seeks to destroy him first by sleeping with all of his wives, the same way he slept with someone else's wife in the public square, and then he seeks to overthrow him by rising up his own military. And brothers and sisters, what we find from this is that David now has to go and deal with his son. And the end result is that David kills his own son Absalom. And when he kills his own son Absalom, he mourns, he's frustrated, and he's sad. But brothers and sisters, all of this stems from the fact that he went down the wrong path. He made the wrong decision. And what this shows us is when you stop trusting in God, and you start trusting in your own understanding, when you stop doing the right thing and you start doing your own thing, that doesn't only impact you, but it impacts your children. Brothers and sisters, this impacted his children to the point of which it is the beginning of the fall of the empire. Brothers and sisters, we now are here with Solomon. And Solomon is David's son. And David's son, Solomon, now also has an issue. He has the same issue that his father has with women. And the fall of his empire comes from the fact that he starts worshiping foreign gods, which are the gods of the women that he falls in love with. Now, this may be ironic, brothers and sisters, because King Solomon is the one that wrote the book of Proverbs. King Solomon is the one that, if you can remember, was faithful to God, and God loved him just like he loved his father David. However, brothers and sisters, he loved him so much that he decided to go to King Solomon in a dream and say, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. King Solomon asked for wisdom, and the ironic part about this is that he gets this wisdom. God blesses him with wisdom, and because he asked for wisdom and not riches, he gives him wisdom and wealth. And brothers and sisters, where the kingdom continues to fall is in the fact that King Solomon began to trust in his own wisdom more than he began to trust in God. Brothers and sisters, when King Solomon became king, he was in his early 20s. And he constantly prayed to God, constantly was in right relationship with God, to the point of which he wanted to be the wisest king so that he could properly govern his people. But brothers and sisters, a once pure heart that Solomon had began to be tainted by his own request. And brothers and sisters, after God blesses him with this wisdom, Solomon starts being more faithful and starts appreciating and starts investing his spiritual and emotional time in the fact that he's been blessed with wisdom opposed to trusting in God. And brothers and sisters, he's more caught up in what God blessed him with opposed to being caught up in who blessed him. And brothers and sisters, we see an issue here where God has blessed Solomon. And Solomon's more involved, more infatuated with the blessing and has lost his relationship with God. And brothers and sisters, sometimes along this path called life, sometimes in this path of life, we find ourselves caught up in the things that God has blessed us with. So much so that it impacts our relationship with God. Brothers and sisters, in the world today, we find ourselves facing a pandemic. And although we are America, and although we are a world that has so much technology, this pandemic has slowed us down. This pandemic has slowed us down to the point at which it puts us in realization that we don't have the control which we thought we had. And brothers and sisters, a lot of people has attributed God to being the one that has caused this pandemic. But what I want to show you is something interesting about how God works. Just like with the story of King David and the story of Solomon, I've realized that God will oftentimes correct us by allowing us to fall victim to our own demise. That just like with this pandemic, although people are blaming God, saying God is doing this to punish us for how we've lived and all this and that, I don't think God is directly doing that, brothers and sisters, but I think what God is doing is allowing us to fall victim to our own demise. He's almost like a parent that's told us to stop doing things, told us to try to live right, shown us how to live and do the right things. But since we've fallen victim to the things he's blessed us with the technology we have, with all the resources we have, and all the things that we can now do, he's allowed us to fall victim to our own demise. And brothers and sisters, what this brings us to the realization is that some of the issues we face along the path isn't Satan's doing, isn't God's doing, but the fact that we've messed up, but the fact that we've made the wrong decision. Just like David made that decision on his own to sleep with Bathsheba. It wasn't Satan that made him make that decision. The text doesn't say an evil spirit came over David to sleep with Bathsheba. No, David made that decision on his own. Brothers and sisters, when after Solomon erected the temple to God, he then started erecting temples to the gods of his concubines and the gods of his wives. It wasn't an evil spirit that made King Solomon do that. It was his own decision to do that. And brothers and sisters, what we begin to realize is some of the issues we face along the path isn't somebody else distracting us, but our own mind causing us to fall victim to our own demise. And brothers and sisters, what we see in the midst of this pandemic is that all the success we've had, all the sense of entitlement, the fact that it talks about in Genesis, the fact that we have dominion over the plants, over the animals, and the things of this world, because we have not been great stewards of the things that God has blessed us with, because we've exploited the earth of its natural resources, because we've continually pushed the livestock to the outskirts of our area and the outskirts of our country. Now nature is fighting back. Brothers and sisters, I watched a documentary on Netflix that I encourage you to watch called Pandemic, and it's another one called COVID-19 Explained. And while we're blaming countries and other people for the pandemic, realistically, this pandemic was brought upon us by our own greed. Brothers and sisters, as we continue to expand with oil, as we continue to expand with building things, as we continue to increase our technology and do so many things in the world, we are depleting this world of so many of its natural resources. And we find ourselves in a place where we're experiencing what is called global warming. And brothers and sisters, in these documentaries, they've shown us that where at one time we had natural things in the land that separated the different diseases and viruses that were in our livestock and in our animals, now we've destroyed so much of the land and destroyed so much of those barriers between human life and animal life that those same diseases that are in the animals are now affecting us and are causing us to have so many of the health issues we have today. That's why you have things with the swine flu. We've had the SARS. We've had so many of these different diseases, and all of these different diseases speak to the fact of how we have depleted and pushed animals to a point of which now the earth is fighting us back as if we're the disease. Brothers and sisters, scientists have likened humanity on the earth to a parasite, to an organism. That yes, we occupy this earth, but because we deplete the earth of so many natural resources, brothers and sisters, because we try to get so much food based off our businesses, and we pack all these animals together and kill them and do so many things to them that is so inhumane, and just so that we can have our fried chicken, our hot dogs, and all of the food we love to eat, brothers and sisters, the earth is now fighting back, trying to correct itself. And we are now the victims of our own greed. Just like David was the victim of his own greed. Because he stopped trusting in God. Stopped trusting in the things and the right way God had instructed him to live, and started trusting in his own desires. And brothers and sisters, this pandemic, I believe, is a result of us trusting in our own abilities to sustain ourselves. But brothers and sisters, what we're going to have to do now is get back on the right track. That's all we can do. What we have to do now is realign ourselves and get back in right relationship with God. Because it's through getting back in right relationship with God, we may not be able to heal our earth. We may not be able to redo all of the livestock and everything that we've done wrong and killed. However, what we can do is realign ourselves with God so that God can fix and do what he needs to do to help sustain us. The world that we're going to have on the other side of the pandemic won't be the world that we had prior to the pandemic. And brothers and sisters, while we're in the midst of this pandemic, we can be working on aligning ourselves. Brothers and sisters, it may be dark with despair when you think about your job. It may be dark with despair when you think about your children having to figure out what they're going to do as far as online learning and what that means for the longevity of how they'll understand and process information. It may be dark when we look at the fact that it's coming up to flu season in the near future, and we don't know what it's going to look like as this virus evolves. But in spite of all we don't know, what we do know is that in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6, that you can trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And brothers and sisters, the text reminds us that in all our ways we should consider him, and he will make our path straight. Brothers and sisters, it's not easy in this thing called life, because what we have to do, no matter how bad it gets along the path, is trust in a God that understands our beginning, our middle, and our end. Brothers and sisters, we've talked a lot about getting off the path, but this is how you realign yourself to get back on the path. Let's go back to our text. And if you have your Bible, this is what I want you to do. The passage of scripture says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. Brothers and sisters, what I want us to do is look at the answer to how we can realign ourselves. It's all here in the text. We can take the first line. I want you to underline that with your pen or pencil that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Then combine that with the last line of verse 6. And that'll make this claim say, trust in the Lord with all your heart. He will make your path straight. You can omit the middle part, brothers and sisters, and the middle part of the text is what will teach you how to make that claim true. So the first part, the claim statement, is trust in the Lord with all your heart. He will make your path straight. But the middle part, which tells you how to do that, is do not rely on your own insight, and in all your ways acknowledge him. So brothers and sisters, what that teaches us is that in order to trust in the Lord with all our heart so that our paths will be straight, we must constantly rely on God, not our own insight. We must constantly acknowledge him. We can see how when King David was on the right path and King Solomon were on the right path, they were constantly acknowledging God. We can see what kept them in right relationship with God was their ability to acknowledge him in their good and in their bad. And what that teaches us is that as long as we're acknowledging God and all that we're experiencing, it'll keep us in the right spiritual and mental mindset that will allow our paths to be straight. Not omitting calamity, not omitting hardship, but that gives us a roadmap onto what we need to do. So brothers and sisters, when we think about how to reorient ourselves, when we think about how to realign ourselves, all we have to do is trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not on our own understanding. So I'm going to close with this story. Back when I was an undergrad, my good friend Amari, who's come to this church several times with his wife, he just had a baby. We were roommates, and we went to Panama my senior year. And we went to Panama. I won't go into detail about all the things we did in Panama because that's unimportant at this time. But nonetheless, the way back from Panama taught me a big lesson about trusting in the Lord. And brothers and sisters, although we had done all kinds of things in spring break and on that trip, the Lord was still faithful to us. And brothers and sisters, what I will tell you in Panama, Panama is about almost 5 hours away from the city of Atlanta, equaling about 300 or so miles in that journey going back and forth. And the interesting part about this, we had so much fun that we had kind of missed our time to get home before it got dark, and we wind up getting on the road to leave Panama at nighttime. Now, little did we know a storm was coming to Panama that night. And we didn't check the weather. We didn't plan to do all that. This trip was sporadic anyway. So we hopped in our car and we went to head back to the city of Atlanta. And brothers and sisters, it first started raining, a gentle rain. Then the rain started picking up as we were on the road, and it started raining so bad that we could barely see the road. I mean, it was the type of rain that when you're on the expressway, you have to put on your hazard lights so that they blink, so that the cars in front of you and behind you can see something of your vehicle while it's storming and raining so hard. And brothers and sisters, I'm sad to inform you that my friend's car was an old Ford Taurus, a 2006 model. And he had worn that Taurus out to where the headlights were cloudy, so the lights weren't that bright on the Taurus, and the windshield wipers weren't that strong. So this wasn't the best vehicle to be traveling from Panama to Atlanta at night in the midst of a storm. And brothers and sisters, what adds insult to injury is the fact that while we're on the expressway, 18-wheelers are passing us by because, you know, they travel more frequently at night, it seems. And they're passing us by. They're splashing water on the car. The wind of the 18-wheeler is rocking the car around. And brothers and sisters, what's even more disrespectful about this is that we could barely see the roads as we're driving, or barely see the lines of the road as we're driving, trying to make our way home to Atlanta. So as we're driving, we're praying. And as we're praying, we're asking God to please get us home safely. Allow this storm to let up. And brothers and sisters, God didn't let the storm let up. The storm kept raging. And all we had in the storm was the headlights that were cloudy, that only allowed us to see about 2 feet in front of the car. So needless to say, Amari and I are holding or as close as we can to the windshield just to try to see as much of the road as possible. We tried to turn the radio on to calm our anxieties, but the storm is raging so loud outside, and his car is so old that you could barely hear the radio and barely hear the music, so that didn't help. But brothers and sisters, we kept on praying, and we kept on trusting that although we couldn't see the road, although the wind was blowing, although the storm was raging and the water was beating against the windshield, and we were terrified to death and just wanted to make it home, we just had the 2 feet of visibility in front of the car. And brothers and sisters, we followed that 2 feet of visibility, the 300 miles it took us to get from Panama to Atlanta. And brothers and sisters, I'm a living witness and testimony of the fact that God delivered us faithfully through that storm without any accidents, without veering off the road, without missing any exits, and without possibly hitting any other cars. Brothers and sisters, I want to tell you that in the midst of all that's going on, sometimes the wind of despair will start blowing. Sometimes the darkness of despair will try to weigh you down. Sometimes the beating of fear and frustration will weigh down on your personal and spiritual windshield. But what you have to do is pray and trust in the Lord. What you have to do is believe that a God that brought you thus far along your journey will take you considerable distance along your journey, that the God that brought you this far won't leave you behind or leave you in the midst of despair, won't leave you in the midst of fear, won't leave you in the midst of chaos. Brothers and sisters, the same God that brought us to Panama, that allowed us and protected us while we were having a good time, is the same God that delivered us through the storm. Brothers and sisters, we were scared, and brothers and sisters, we talk about this story to this day. But I just want to let you know that even if you can only have 2 feet of visibility in your life, of the pathway God has for you, even if you don't fully understand the road and why God is doing what he's doing in your life, even if you're frustrated, angry, and confused about being on the path that you're on, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways consider him, and he will make your paths straight. Brothers and sisters, the Lord didn't stop the rain. He didn't stop the wind. He didn't ease up on the 18-wheelers passing us by, splashing water on our dashboard. But what he showed us is that I'm with you in the midst of hardship. What he showed us is I'm with you no matter what you're going through. What he showed us is I'm with you and I'll provide for you even though your vehicle isn't up to standards to get you through this storm. Brothers and sisters, we serve a God that's faithful. But I'm just asking, are you going to be faithful to him? I'm just asking, will you trust him and stop leaning on your own understanding? Will you be better than David and King Saul? Will you be better than them and remain faithful and continue to align yourself in right relationship with God? Brothers and sisters, it's easy to start off good. We saw that in the example of our kings. It's easy to start off doing the right thing, but can you maintain that level of piety and discipline and relationship with God when things are good and when things are bad? And brothers and sisters, what we can see through God's track record is God is faithful to us regardless, but God will continue blessing us the more faithful we are. Brothers and sisters, I'm not saying our faithfulness or God's blessings are contingent upon our faith. But what I'm saying is that a God that has been so faithful to us, a God that has blessed us, should be rewarded by our faithfulness, should be thanked by our trust, should be thanked by us not relying on our own ability, but relying on God's ability. Now at this time, the doors of the church, of the virtual church, are now open. So if any one of you wants a relationship with God where you're tired of trusting and leaning on your own understanding, if any of you all wants to be in deeper relationship with God, you can take this time now to give your life to Christ. All you have to do is confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord. So that when the storm comes, so that when times are hard, so that even in the midst of this pandemic, you can make it through. So what I want you all to do now is that if anyone on the other end of the screen does not have a church home or relationship, you can call our phones, you can send us an email at newmorninglight.org. You can go to our website at newmorninglight.org. You can visit us on Facebook and send us a message that way. You can call our church. Sheila Mathis, our secretary, will get in contact with you. You can send me an email at reverendcharles@newmorninglight.org. And we can help you get connected with us here as a church home, or we can help you find another church that's closer to your area. But brothers and sisters, the transformation of your life and you being on the straight and narrow path that God has for you first begins with your trust in the Lord. Once again, God bless you, and I thank you for watching us. Have a safe and wonderful week. Amen.